Today, we're going to be talking about how to start a podcast. It's something that is fairly simple to do, and a lot of people overthink it, so let's break it down. In order to start your podcast, you're going to need three main things. Number one, an idea. Number two, a microphone of some sort. And number three, a way of sharing your audio out into the world. Having a video for your podcast is very beneficial, but for the sake of this video, we're going to stick to the good old audio-only podcast, kind of like how it was meant to be. First of all, equipment. There are a ton of equipment options for a podcast, and really it all just comes down to your budget, the audio quality that you're looking to achieve, your desired outcome of the podcast, and where you will be shooting or recording your podcast. After experimenting with various audio equipment over the years and hours of research about this kind of thing, here's the equipment that I personally use for my podcast that I would recommend to everyone beginning. First up, we have the Zoom PodTrack P4, and this is an audio recorder. It has 4 input channels, so you're able to record 4 voices at once, which is typically much more than you would need, but if you need that many channels, the option is there. And then for my microphone, I use the Samson Q2U microphones. They're very affordable, very budget friendly, and they also have incredible audio quality and are very portable and easy to use. And they're both professional quality and should definitely deliver the audio quality that you're looking for. The next thing I like to think about when starting a podcast is imagining what your podcast is going to look like a year from now. So if you started today, what do you think it would look like in a year? Is there video for your podcast? Is it audio only? Are you traveling a lot to interview certain guests? Or do you have a certain and dedicated studio space that you can shoot each episode in? Each person's scenario is obviously going to be different. So think about what might be your vision for the podcast and maybe think about your gear and equipment in regards to your vision. But unless you have a dedicated studio space that you're going to record each podcast, having a mobile and lightweight setup is going to be the easiest option to get the interviews that you're looking for. Now, another hack for podcasts that we won't get into much today is shooting video with your podcast so that this content can then be repurposed for short form content for Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and or TikToks. If you're worried about missing out on this opportunity, I would recommend setting up a couple iPhones to record you and or your guest when you're shooting the podcast. That way you have some sort of video that you can pair with the audio and use it for your socials. For the sake of your first few podcast episodes, I would recommend sticking to audio only just because it's much more simple, there's a lot less equipment involved, and a lot less to learn. You may find that you wish you would have done video for the first few episodes, and you might already have an active social media account or brand that you can post these things to, or you might realize that you're already slightly overwhelmed by this whole process and adding video to the mix would just complicate things even further. Regardless of your take, everyone needs to start somewhere, and I'm a huge advocate for making things as simple as possible when you're first getting started. You want to keep the barrier to entry low so that you can actually get your foot in the door and make that first episode. My argument is that most people don't ever get to the point of actually starting the thing, and so it's my goal to break down that barrier for you guys and make it as simple as possible. So to begin, the first things first, you need an idea for your podcast. The biggest thing that might be holding you back from starting your podcast is, what's my topic going to be? This is certainly a valid question, but it's one that you should not overthink at the very beginning. In my personal opinion, the beauty of a podcast is that each episode is pretty drastically different, especially if you're interviewing people. Everyone has a different perspective, different knowledge base, and wisdom, and so each person is going to bring something different to the table. Rather than worrying about a specific topic, I would recommend you look for 5 to 10 people that you can bring onto your podcast for your first episodes and decide what value they can add to your audience and to your podcast. If you plan to do a solo podcast, I'd recommend starting with 3 to 5 topics that you can talk about. Begin with scripting these out, writing out an outline before you actually record the audio. Another thing that I'll certainly be talking about in the future is that every form of creation is downstream from writing. So begin with something written and then your creation can come to fruition. You'll probably find that if you're passionate about the topic that you're going to be speaking about, the words are going to flow like butter when you're first getting started, and it should be pretty easy to talk about them for an extended period of time. But I'd still recommend writing it out first. Once these words start to flow, you'll realize that your podcast has officially begun. Good work. Number 2 on the list, you need a way to record audio. The most important takeaway here is to simply get started. Start with the most minimal setup that you can that's going to allow you to just do it rather than think about it for another week or two or push it off for a couple years. You can always upgrade your equipment as your podcast grows and progresses, but getting started is the most important part. And then you can decide if you actually want to keep going. Equipment is only helpful when it allows your creative work to get better, not be a barrier. A podcast with poor audio quality is still better than a podcast that's sitting inside someone's brain, just ruminating for years. With this being said, if you'd like to get started with the easiest, most accessible option, most people have a smartphone or iPhone that they can record voice memos on. And I would just recommend you put that bad boy on the table, point it towards you, and press record on your voice memos, and boom, start talking. You might be surprised at how good of audio iPhones can capture, and that can be helpful for starting a podcast, adding an external microphone to any film that you're creating, or even just picking up some external sound outside. If you're looking for more of a commitment, I would highly recommend the Samson Q2U that I'm using. It's an affordable option, easy to use, and in my opinion, great for beginners. The beauty of this microphone specifically is that you can plug into XLR, which I'm using, which is going into an audio recording device, or you can actually plug it directly into a laptop and record from there. So you have a couple options for recording both to software or to a hardware device like an audio recorder. This makes it easy to get started because if you have a laptop and the microphone, you can record directly into it, and that can be your way of recording. Unfortunately, there's not a great way to record 2 audio inputs into a laptop at once from these microphones, so that's why I chose to go with the Zoom PodTrack P4, because you can record up to 4 channels at once, and this is perfect for if you're doing an interview guest or if you have a host or co-host with your podcast. In my opinion, this is the ideal setup. It's very portable, easy to use. You can pack it in a bag wherever you're going. It's easy to bring on flights if you're traveling farther for interviews. And it's just really easy to set up quickly. And finally, you need a way to be able to share your audio and your podcast out into the world. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just simply uploading your audio to a place like Spotify. For podcasts, there are directories that you typically have to pay a monthly fee for. And then you can upload your audio to that and link it to different apps and platforms. As usual, there are several options of directories to choose from, but most of them are pretty similar depending on functionality and price. I personally chose to go with Buzzsprout. It's a popular option amongst podcasters and creators in general, and it's been a pretty time-tested one that has been around for a while. This process can be a little bit confusing at first, but once you've uploaded that first podcast episode, you'll remember how to do it next time, and the process is a bit more streamlined. If you do decide to add video to your podcast, an easy and affordable way to get your podcast out there is uploading it to YouTube. Adding a full-length podcast episode can be added to YouTube and uploaded to YouTube just as any other video would be. Starting a podcast can definitely seem like a daunting task at first, but keeping it simple and sustainable will allow you to create for future episodes and years to come. Think about the easiest way for you to personally get started with a podcast. What would that look like for you? Rather than stressing about the fancy equipment and the many options for equipment and directories and all of these things, just focus on great ideas and a simple way to record audio in order to get started. It's definitely better to get started with imperfections than to never get started at all. So just do it. Let me know what you're planning to talk about on your podcast in the comments down below. Let's make that an encouraging and helpful place. Thanks for watching. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see. I'm super stoked to be doing this, and hopefully this is helping you to create better content on a budget. My name is Eric. Peace.